Windows 11, it's on its way. There's not a whole lot we can do about it. There's meant to be a Microsoft event coming pretty shortly that will understandably probably unveil the official release date for Windows 11 if we don't already have that. So by the time you're watching this video, there's probably more news. So let's talk about how Windows 11 and Linux are shaping up. Traditionally speaking, this would be a showdown where I would pit one against the other and say which one is better. I feel like we're a bit more mature than that these days, surely, maybe? And what we can do, however, is look at what are the alternatives out there. What has Windows learnt from Linux, and what can Linux learn from Windows, if anything? So, if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to the channel if you're new. Click the like button if this is something that you are interested in. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite thing about Windows 11 is. And let's jump with 2 big feet into this mud pie. Before we get going on today's video, a quick word from our sponsor, Skillshare. If you're not familiar, Skillshare is an online learning community, and they've got thousands, literally thousands, of inspiring classes for creative people, curious people, or just lifelong learners. You can explore new skills or deepen existing passions you might have, or just get lost in a new creative pursuit. Whether that's UI, UX design, web development, photography, video production, you name it, there's probably a course on Skillshare led by an industry professional that you can get involved in. One of the courses that I've been getting a lot of value from over the last few weeks is Greg McKeown's Simple Productivity: How to Accomplish More with Less. It's based around a book that I read from Greg McKeown last year on essentialism, and I found it to be really helpful in focusing up what are the important projects in my life that I need to deliver on. Skillshare is a great place to pick up productivity tips or just upskill in an area of interest for you. So if there is a pursuit that you want to get involved in, then definitely head down to the description box below, because the first 1,000 people that click on the link in the description box below will get a 1-month free trial to Skillshare Premium. No ads, unlimited access to premium courses that are consistently getting updated with new and original content. So definitely go to the link in the description, check it out, and thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's episode. Okay, if you're too impatient and you want to get to the punchline of this video, here's what my recommendation is. If you do not require gaming or very specialized professional software, there has never been a better time to check out Linux as an alternative for everyday home, office, study, whatever it is kind of use. Even casual gaming it can handle with aplomb. But nevertheless, some AAA games, anti-cheat systems, and professional suites of software still require good old Redmond's best. So that's the too long didn't watch version. Now let's jump on. We'll have a look at some first impressions of Windows 11, and I want to make some rather astute comparisons between Windows 11 and what I think is one of the best competitors for people looking for an alternative to Windows in the world in 2021, which would be the recently released Zorin OS 16. Go watch that video if you're curious to find out more. Let's jump into it and we'll see what we can find out. I want to start out with a few general thoughts between the two, Windows 11 and Zorin OS 16. By the way, for reference, I'm using the beta build that was available in the beta channel of Windows Insiders as of about the middle of September. And I also have Zorin OS Core 16 installed in a virtual machine here just as a ready reference so I can jump between the two. So first of all, both of these distributions have undergone significant visual refresh to try and update them and give them a lighter and a breezier feel. There is much better hardware acceleration between both Windows 11 and Zorin OS in my experience. The animations on both these desktops seem so much smoother than what it was in the releases of Zorin OS 15 and in Windows 10. And also, it is great to see that the gestures on trackpads that we used to envy in the world of macOS are also present in both Zorin OS 16 and in Windows 11. So already there's a lot of shared ground out of the box between these two systems, and that's great to see. When it comes to installation, driver management, and getting everything up and running, both systems are fairly intuitive when it comes to installing the drivers that you need. For Windows, Windows is usually fairly good at getting them through Windows Update and installing them that way. Zorin OS is, I would say, better at managing drivers out of the box in that it does provide you with the latest NVIDIA drivers. It'll install them from the installer. And so for me personally, who runs a laptop that has a discrete NVIDIA card in it, the installation was flawless when it came to actually installing the OS and it detecting everything out of the box. I'm going to talk more about hardware compatibility in a later section, but I'm just kind of covering off on some of the main points as we get started. The other thing that I like to see between the two of them, and traditionally this is something where Linux has excelled at, is having a unified system settings panel. I've talked about this multiple times on my channel before, but having one place that you can go to adjust your system settings is very, very helpful. And both Zorin OS and Windows 11 seem to both get the memo when it comes to people wanting all of their settings in one place. Now I say that with two big caveats. Here on Zorin OS 16, you've got a separate tool to adjust the appearance of the desktop, including the layout of the desktop, which is something that Windows 11 doesn't let you adjust at all, even less so than Windows 10. Adjust the theme and the accent color, the dark mode or light mode or automatic, and also jelly mode, which I'll come back to, but that's a bit of fun that you definitely don't get on Windows 11. And a few desktop shortcut keys to help you navigate around the desktop, and also the font sizes. So while I celebrate the fact that that this particular Linux distribution has a great way of packaging all of the settings that you need into one settings panel, I would give the same praise for the most part to Windows 11, in that Windows 10's settings panel was a nightmare. This is much cleaner, much easier to see where you're going and what's going on. It's got a very simple left-hand panel here to help you navigate through the settings, and then these search settings actually reveal the sort of stuff that you would want from your system settings. It does take a beat inside the settings app, but bear in mind this is in beta. The other thing that obviously has been around for some time is the fact that ultimately you can still open the control panel in Windows. This has been around since ever really with Windows, and it seems like while most of the features and settings that most people would want to adjust are present here and accounted for in the new system settings app in Windows 11, it still remains part of the legacy of Windows as an operating system. I guarantee you there'd be some enterprise software out there that would rely on the settings that are plugged into the control panel here. So it's an unfortunate side, I guess, cost of having legacy support for software that is decades old at this point. Zorin doesn't suffer from that kind of legacy, so away they go. It's also worth pointing out that while Windows has been around for well over 20 years at this point, Zorin has been around for quite some time as well. I believe the first release of Zorin came out in 2009, making this distribution well over 10 years old. So if you're worried about how long-term this OS is going to be around for, trust me, this has been around for some time. Okay. It's also great to see that, coming back to those system settings overviews, it's also great to see really granular search available in both of these distributions. So if I search for nightlight, it will immediately jump me into the screen display settings where I can adjust my nightlight features, both the same on Zorin and in Windows 11. Great feature to have, to be able to just tap the Windows key in both of these systems and it will jump you straight to where you want to go. Now, Windows 11 does get a slight advantage in this particular case in that they have the suggestions of recent files that you may have used, and so file results do filter into the search panel here. The search panel is also much more self-contained than what you get on Zorin. Obviously, this panel is, or this launcher rather, is a brand new feature in Windows 11. It's designed to act more like a smartphone or a tablet and be more familiar in those settings. But it also is worth pointing out that it doesn't have the same level of customization as what you got from the traditional Windows 10 start menu, or even the Windows 7 start menu before that. By default in Zorin OS Core, you have a much more traditional menu when it comes to the apps that are available. And while you do have filtered search here in the menu, the powerful search comes from tapping the Windows key and just starting to type what you're looking for. And you'll get this full screen app launcher that jumps you straight into whichever app you want to go for. Now, I believe you can also have file results show up in this Windows key search on Zorin as well. And I believe that most of the home folders here are indexed so that if there is a particular file you're looking for by the power of the GNOME desktop, it will then be able to grab that file. So again, really comparable with some of the everyday searching and launching that we do. All right, so let's talk about privacy really quick, because this is a general thing that needs to be covered off on, and it's worth mentioning. So while Windows 10 definitely got a reputation for being very privacy invasive, the same trend does seem to continue with Windows 11. There is a business model behind this OS, as is the case with Zorin OS. Both of these products exist effectively for the user to use for free, more or less. You can basically update from Windows 10 to Windows 11 as long as you've got a Windows 10 license around, either an OEM or a retail license. You can update to Windows 11 for free effectively. Now, the thing is that Microsoft owning the OS means that they can use any opportunity they can to market their other products and services to you. So that typically plays out in the privacy and security settings that are enabled by default in the OS. Things like targeted advertising or being able to send telemetry back to Microsoft to give both data on how the OS can be improved, but also data on how you as a user interact with your device and what services and ads might be best suited to you. So there are always privacy concerns, and if people are thinking about wanting to limit their digital footprint online, then definitely considering something like Zorin is not a bad place to start. By default, the only thing that Zorin phones home about is a checkbox that's available in the installer to either check or uncheck. By default, it is left unchecked. It is an opt-out situation where it'll send an anonymous ping basically to the Zorin servers to give the team that work on Zorin an idea of how many active users they have out there, and that's about it. There isn't any other telemetry. Even the telemetry that is default in Firefox has actually been disabled in Zorin OS by default. So even Firefox and the Mozilla team don't get any information about how you're using your computer or anything like that. So it is really honestly worth mentioning that in 2021, the privacy nightmare of where all your data is going in Windows 11 is a bit of a sham show. And for some people, that's not an issue. And for others, it's a big issue. Whereas with Zorin, the only thing that's present is a checkbox that you can opt out of at the start to send a ping back to the Zorin team to let them know how many active users they have. All right. That's the general stuff. Let's spend a couple minutes talking about the visual style. I do love the fact that Windows 11 has gotten rid of all the sharp edges. I think it really was starting to date on Windows 10. The fact that they kept it around for Windows 8 and Windows 10, that same design language, it was great to see a more fluid, transparent, glassy approach here. However, what I would say is that this system and this design trend of everything being very rounded off and being very translucent is also the same on Mac OS, and it's interesting to see design head this way. Other Linux distributions such as Deepin and even KDE to some degree are also cashing in on this translucency fad that seems to be going on. Zorin OS, on the other hand, has a very rounded off and relatively smooth theme. However, they don't seem to have gone all in on the translucency side of things. While the panel is a little bit transparent, it's definitely not frosted glass everywhere. Now, I appreciate the simple customization that you get with the accent colors and the light or dark theming. You can change other themes in Linux, obviously. The desktop is your oyster in terms of customization goes, but I feel like the team have given just enough options here to make it accessible for the user and easy to enable a little bit of personality to your desktop without completely fudging it up. It also is great to see that the icon set works really well no matter what accent color you have. So if you change your accent color in the dialog box here, you notice all of the icons update appropriately as well. The hinting and all of that looks fantastic. On the Windows side of things, you get arguably less customization over things, but a similar amount enabled by default. I think the biggest loss that a lot of people are going to feel is the fact that Windows 11 at this stage anyway, and this I could be wrong about where this lands in the final build, doesn't seem to let you change where you want the taskbar in the desktop layout. While a product like Zorin gives you a quick ability to change the overall layout of your desktop to suit how your workflow and how your brain works, you are definitely locked in to how Windows 11 presents itself to you in the first instance. So for me, you can see I've come in here and I've disabled all of these buttons around widgets and the chat and other annoying features that Windows 11 will try and push on you. And while I've left the centered panel here, which I don't really mind. I've actually got the same centered panel set up on my actual native Zorin install. You are limited. This panel cannot be moved, and the stuff that lives on this panel is basically there permanently. Is that a good thing or not? I'm not really sure. It seems most desktops are landing on this centered dock approach, and Windows seems to be engineering its taskbar into playing that role of a centered dock for all of your apps. Chrome OS, Mac OS, a lot of other operating systems seem to be going this way, so it seems to be following a trend. Also, it is worth mentioning that Windows seems to be getting more and more bloated with some of the things that it queues up in its startup list. Now, obviously, this is a system that I've been using for many years, and I just did an in-place upgrade. So I've got a lot of other stuff that I've disabled from starting up. But with a clean install of Windows 11, you still have quite a few things launching in the background. Things like Microsoft OneDrive, things like the consumer Teams client, and other bits and pieces that do impact startup time. On Zorin, I don't believe you have too much stuff starting up. If you enable Zorin Connect, which is their smartphone connection utility, that will start up. But apart from that, I don't think there's too much else that's in the startup by default. Not really. So definitely startup times between Windows 11, while improved, and Zorin OS are pretty good. I would say time from boot up to login is quicker on Zorin. The time from login into the desktop is about the same. It goes without saying that on the productivity front, it is easier still to integrate your online accounts with Windows than it is with Zorin, but not by much. When you come in, if you already have a Microsoft account, which by the way, you basically are mandated to get one if you're running Windows 11 home, you have to log in with a Microsoft account, then obviously that will bring in calendar, email, and all that stuff out of the box. When it comes to Zorin OS, when you boot up Zorin for the first time and they give you the little tour here, you can actually log into your online accounts directly in this startup app, and it will redirect you to the settings and allow you to connect to Google, Microsoft, and other accounts as well. And it will actually set these accounts up in the default email client and in the calendar as well. So these are really comparable. I've just noticed that there are sometimes account wonkiness that you get that you probably wouldn't get if you were trying to connect an Exchange account. For example, with Windows 11, it would click right through, whereas sometimes you have to be a bit more specific with the servers and stuff when you're using it in Zorin. But the point of the matter being, the fact that it's very easy to do in 2021 makes sense. And in some ways, the ability to tie in to-do apps like Todoist in Zorin using the online accounts can be very, very helpful. Now, the only other productivity thing that I want to mention with Windows 11 is that one of the headlining features is around window management. Windows 11 has really cottoned onto something that's a bit of genius here when it comes to window management and bridging that gap between using window tiling managers and just traditional drag and drop windows. For example, when you hover over the maximize button, as I'm sure many of you have seen, it gives you some suggested tiling layouts for the different windows that you have. This is a feature that I think is a small bit of genius from Microsoft's part in order to expose some of the options that are available to the user to tile the windows. Most of these layouts have been available in Windows 10 for some time, but they were always hidden behind keyboard shortcuts or dragging your window to a particular corner of the screen. Whereas now surfacing them using the maximize button is a really nice stroke of genius. On the Zorin OS side of things, you are by default met with a little more basic window tiling in that sense, and you can enable extensions which give you more options, but by default you just have left, right, or maximize, and that's kind of it. So the productivity win here for Windows 11 is definitely around these tiling windows, but also the ability for the OS to remember where windows belong when you plug in an external monitor or when you unplug an external monitor. So if you have a particular layout with all of your windows spread across multiple monitors and you unplug your laptop and plug it in a lot, it will remember where those windows belong and you don't have to reset every time. The multi-monitor support on Zorin OS is getting better. And this is largely due to the work that the GNOME team have done on multi-monitor support. But it just doesn't feel as smooth, elegant, or as, intuitive as what it does on Windows 11. I'd say it's the one thing that Windows has really improved considerably on. Okay, let's talk about performance really quickly. I would say overall, to me, this beta of Windows 11 does feel snappier on this hardware than the previous Windows 10 install that lived here. I don't know what it is, but with each build, the performance has gotten snappier and the desktop just flies, in my opinion. Now, the same can be said for Zorin. Because of the fluidity of the animations, the performance work that went into the GNOME desktop about a year or so ago, the desktop feels really snappy. Now, you can't really tell per se on this video because of the fact I'm looking at a virtual machine and I've limited it to a couple of cores and 8 gig of RAM and that kind of thing. But on my native hardware, Zorin OS flies. It's a strange place to be where both systems feel equally snappy to me. There used to always be a performance overhead that Windows 10 had. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So I don't know what optimizations both teams have made to their systems, but they both feel really snappy on modern hardware. Definitely the advantages will swing into your favor if your laptop is or your desktop even is 5 to 6 years old or more. Zorin will definitely feel snappier on that hardware. But it is worth mentioning with when it comes to performance and utilization of the hardware in general, what I've found is that Windows 11 can scale up and scale down the fan a lot more quickly than what Zorin does. So what I mean by that is that when you're plugged into power, Windows 11 will and just through, I guess, more accurate driver management or firmware or whatever it is, we'll be able to scale up and scale down the performance really well compared to Zorin OS, where it seems a lot more, I guess, consistent or not as immediate. Now, I don't know if that is just a problem of my hardware, but it definitely feels like the fan is more responsive to spinning up to load on Windows 11 than it does on Zorin. Now, I don't actually see any performance hits as a result of that, but it is worth mentioning. Also, by default, both systems seem comparable on the battery front. There's been some great work done optimizing the Linux kernel for I believe we're on the 5.11 kernel series with battery life on laptops. And so for me personally, I'm getting the same battery life on both, and that's running the NVIDIA driver on Zorin in the on-demand mode, very similar to how it would be running on Windows. It is worth mentioning, however, the install footprint of Zorin is a mere 15 gigabytes compared to a required 64 gigabytes on Windows 11. All right, I'm going to wrap it up with some thoughts about software availability and gaming. Now, both these systems are well documented for their readily available library of software. For Windows 11, they're putting a lot of work into reinvigorating the store and also bringing in Android apps through the Amazon App Store to give you a pseudo Android app experience alongside any Windows software. Microsoft do want to include as much software as possible in this store, but the thing that's more interesting to me this time around is in work that was kind of independent of Windows through their Winget package manager. So when I saw that the Winget package management system was made available, I definitely jumped on that very quickly. One of the fantastic things about Winget is that you can basically treat all of the software that's freely available on your system with traditional package installers, and using Winget, you can scan for updates to that software and it will download and install those relatively seamlessly. This is something that I've wanted in Windows for I don't know how long, because we all have utilities and software that we want to install and use. And if you're proficient on the command line, or if you're used to it in the world of Linux, it becomes a real step back to go hunting around the web for a .exe to install. Having Winget on Windows has been a huge boon of software management for me personally. Being able to come in, issue one command, and let Windows go and scan all the software that's on my laptop and go and pull in the updates that it needs and install those. And I can ask it to install those silently, so it doesn't bother me with permission to proceed. Is very, very cool. Now, on the consumer-facing front, it is great to have an app store, I guess, but I would say I still love the streamlined nature and the sandboxed privacy that Zorin OS has with its software catalog out of the box. It has one of the largest open source software catalogs enabled out of the box, and your ability to update software and apps seamlessly in the background is really, really well executed. Both these systems are going to be around for quite some time. The Zorin OS 16 release is going to be supported for at least 5 years, or at least another 3.5, 4 years on the desktop, according to Ubuntu, the parent distribution of Zorin. And obviously Windows 10 and Windows 11 will be supported for as long as Microsoft sees fit to do so. At the moment, there's obviously a clear direct upgrade path for Windows 10 users to go to Windows 11. At this stage, I don't think there is a direct upgrade path for users of Zorin OS 15 to go to Zorin OS 16. It's just one of those things. I believe they're working on it, but it is worth mentioning. Finally, the paid support options for Windows are well documented in that if you're buying Windows, you are buying the support in some way. But Zorin OS, you can go out and purchase their Pro version for $39, and that will get you support as well. And I think it's worth supporting it in that way. Finally, gaming. The ace in the hole that Windows has is the Xbox Game Pass. There's kind of not much we can do to compete with that in the Linux world. You can, however, install Lutris, and it comes, I believe, either pre-installed or available on Zorin OS to help install whatever games are compatible. So definitely go and check out my suggestions of the best open source apps to install if you want to explore this open source world a little bit further. And definitely go and check out my review of Zorin OS 16 if you want more info about that. Thank you so much for watching, sticking around. I'll see you in the next video.